Ntasinan called Canada. Good morning, good afternoon, Kuwait. I am here from Canada. We call it Canada. I am Innu, half Innu and Quebecoise, and very proud mother and grandmother of 5 beautiful children and 2 granddaughters. But also a militant or a mover or a shaker, but a person with full of love to make sure that what I do today, it's to continue the work of my mom, my grandmother and grandfather, but also my ancestor on the Innu side. And I also honor and acknowledge the Quebecois culture that I carry in my spirit and my blood. And where I'm from, there's a long history, a long pathway of trauma, intergeneral trauma, but also a trauma that was imposed to us. So I want to say thank you to the people of this land where I am today, Ottawa, people that have been here for thousands of years, to remind us that Indigenous people are beautiful, powerful, and even though everything was put in place to erase us, they welcome me every day that I come here on the Parliament Hill. But I'm from what we call Quebec, Nitassinan, and I'm from a place where the same history happened to the Indigenous people on that land. But we say today, reconciliation, probably in different countries, even here in Canada, but it's how we acknowledge or understand or take this word and how we put it back to you or to people that wants to walk with us, beside us. Not for us, but beside us. So thank you for the Indigenous people, but of course, thank you for the invitation. You know, I speak to a screen, you know, it's technical or it's virtual, but I hope that in my few words, I'll be able to give you a little bit of taste of how we became who we are today and why we do things the way we do it today. So I have to go back to a little story that will resonate maybe in your heart or in your spirit. A story that it's not only mine, but it's shared from many, many other people that had the same path here in Canada. I used to be a commissioner for the National Inquiry for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls for many, many moons, 33 months of everyday listening and getting all the truth from family members who lost a loved one. But the same people who participate to that truth gathering or an inquiry, if we use the word for national inquiry, they were also involved with another inquiry years before the national inquiry for MMIW. They were involved with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or inquiry. What strength they have or power they have to again share their truth about what happened to them and still happening to them, hoping that we can change the way we do things here in Canada. But before I go to that part, I want to remind us that those experiences, those moments, those days that we were able to be honored by their truth, the heart truth, there were also some teaching where we were coming from, our stories, our protocols, our way of life way before Canada became Canada. And apparently we were little stars in many nations that we would choose our parent. We would choose who we would go and live on Mother Earth. So I understood my story that I would choose Evelyn. She's Innu, small woman who was born almost in a bush and was an amazing young person and then suddenly went to residential school without her consent. Same with her parents. Parents didn't say, yes, you can take her. So she went there. And then I would choose my dad, very Quebecois, very Francophone, very fair, white, we used to say here, who believed that Quebec, the province of Quebec, should be a country and separate from the rest of Canada. So I choose them. But I don't remember by choosing my parents that I would also choose segregation, discrimination, racism, violence, sexual violence, rape, or many other trauma that we all face here in Canada and other countries, I know for sure. So by choosing my parents, my first breath of life almost came on a train. The train that for my mom left her community in the south, north, the St. Lawrence River. If you Google the map, Seven Island, that would go to Schifferville, way up north. The first statement of colonization, that train will separate the land, tear apart the land, and extract everything that the land is protecting. It was mining industry, forestry industry that was imposed on my mom's land territory. So when I was born, we went back to that train, few days old, just fresh, pure, little baby, like every baby on earth. But I didn't know, choosing my parent, that I would also be facing my first experience of segregation. That little train, we had a special wagon for the savage, just one space. And the rest, what they used to say, it was for the white people until 1989. That same train was taking all the kids, or a plane also, all the kids from the land to bring them to the residential schools until 1996. Some of them closed earlier, some of them closed in the 50s, and in my territory, they opened in 1950, residential schools or day school. So it was a hard thing for my parents, I guess, or they were stubborn. They didn't listen that segregation. They would travel back and forth to the white wagon or to the First Nation, but they call it savage. They didn't care. So I guess in the blood of my parents was also that militant blood to say, we don't accept that. We challenge that. So probably that was why I'm here today, and I believe in that. But I didn't know that my mom, my parents, and then around me and across Turtle Island, that we were all forced to go to residential schools for many decades, where we would lose our language, our connection with the land, our protocols, ceremonies, but also the ground of who we are as Innu people, Anishinaabe people, Ayu, Echu, many nations. Our identity was suffering, was cut off, that connection with the land. And that land that is keeping our language, medicine, food, and identity was shook also by how the people from outside that came here and decided it belongs to them. So that the introduction of my story, or the story of many people. And then we realize many of us are suffering. We don't understand why, we pretend we don't want to see it, or we normalize the situation or the way we are suffering. But there's leaders, natural leaders across Canada that would stand up and say, I hear that there was some commission around the world, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that are happening or happen. And they are talking about that impact of colonization. So it looks like my story. Why I was forced to be relocated, why I was forced to be praying another God instead my gods or my spirituality, why I was forced to stop talking my language or to be separate from my siblings, my loved one, or my people, or my home. So they stood up and explained their truth. So Canada decided to do this inquiry, this commission, for many, many years, 7 years, where people would share their truth. for the first time. And some of them for this many, many times they talked about their truth. But it was the first school of life for many of us to understand that is why our parents were not there, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. They weren't there at all. They were sick, they were suffering, they were like ghosts, empty spirit, sharing or trying to teach us the same emptiness, and the generation over generation went to that path. So thanks for those who stood up. Thanks for the courage. So they said what they had to say. And many of them, for years, carrying all those trauma, intergenerational and multi-generational, carrying those trauma inside, when they spoke, the family, the grandchildren, the children, and the parents, and the brothers and sisters heard for the first time their truth. Can you imagine how powerful was, hurtful, but powerful was those days, those moments? I can't imagine. So for me, lots of respect. But what it did also, we could not pretend that, oh, it's something that it happened in Africa or other country. Canada were the best country in the world, they used to say. They couldn't say that anymore. They couldn't pretend that it didn't happen, because the strength of our people, we used the domestic legislation, domestic justice. And then when we use all of that, we went to the UN, we went to Washington, we went to every place to repeat that truth that we heard, or we were the one talking about our own truth. So it forced Canada to say, oh, it is a cultural genocide. But for many of us those days, when it was happening, cultural genocide, if I go back to my own truth, my own story, I was like, oh my God, we cannot say that. It's too strong talking about cultural genocide. Why are we using that word? Young mom, I was, my son, my first son, he was at like a daycare, we would say, in a family sitting, and she was from Rwanda. And she talked about how she left her country to survive, how she was hidden under dead bodies because her own people were killed by other people. It was a massive genocide. So for me, my first definition of what it was or what it is, genocide, it was the story of this beautiful woman from the Rwanda country. So when I hear cultural genocide those days, many of us, ignorance, not shy to say, was like, no, it's not the same. It's not the same because it's no. But it's where how the brainwash of how here they cut us from the history of our people, they cut us from the beauty of our people in the past, or they cut us from also the hurtful part of our people, and brainwash to become good Canadian citizen and believe that no, there's only one definition and that's the one over there. Over here, it was just a sad moment in the Canadian history. So I had to redo or undo, how I defined something or a situation or an event. And it was very clear for me that when we started the national inquiry for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, I was surrounded by lawyers. The commissioner were all lawyers, and me, I was not a lawyer. I was involved in another movement. And we were all in agreement at the end of the day that the fact or the first evidence, after hearing 3,000 and plus family members, even them that I mentioned earlier in my message to you, that they were also witness to the other Commission for the Truth and Reconciliation. And we understood that it was not only cultural, but it was sexual, it was gender, it was, yes, cultural, but it was genocide. Many little or big form of genocide, but it hear what the women and the men told us. It was the first evidence. So I go back up with my colleagues, the commissioner, as lawyers. It was easy for them to defend or to say genocide. It's genocide. We remove cultural. And me, I raised my hand to my colleagues, and not really Anglophone, you can tell with my accent. I was like, okay, guys, easy for you to defend when you'll go in a public space or in an environment where people are very, very well aware of what is the definition of a genocide in a country. How are you going to argue? It's easy for me. But for me, who lived a little bit of that taste and not being comfortable to defend, we can live the situation, we can go through that situation, but it's another thing to explain and debate or to say, yes, because of those article in that law or that commission or that international convention, I'm not an expert. So can we have an analysis from lawyers that are expert with international convention and all of that and did something specifically on a form of genocide or many forms? So we open our books, our evidence. They had access also with the evidence of the Truth and Reconciliation. And they came back with this document and said, you're right. And we had to argue. Even the lawyer, we were crying, her and I, Fanny Lafontaine, that no, Michèle, it's not the case because it wasn't blah, blah, blah. And I gave her that example. When you have 5 people witnessing, they share their truth. The great-grandfather, the grandfather, the father and the mom, the children, and you have that generation in front of you, all telling their truth during their era, their moment, how they were deported by force, how they were making sure that we will not feed them or give them the money. And so they get poor and hungry, so they'll be vulnerable, so we can use them and deport them because they're so stubborn. They're always going back where it was natural for them, where the fish and the food was. They're nomad. Innu people are nomad. But it seemed not working, so we'll make sure that they're not eating. And we remove everything so they cannot hunt and they cannot use the land. Plus, it's not fast enough. We will send a priest to impose a religion. And that priest for 40 years will abuse, rape many young boys and girls. So they're all affected by that, but it's taboo. We don't talk about that. And the last generation will come and say, I was so abused by everything, by every man, by the system. So I drank my life to death or used drug. I hurt myself to kill myself. And I was listening, and all the commissioner, we were all listening. Residential school, colonization, deportation, and 2 moms or 1 mom lost their 1 or 3 babies, left, never came back, and they don't know they die of what and where they die. They just left in a hospital, ambulance, a flight just across the river, but not allowed to know if they're dead, if they die, and about what, and so on. So I was listening, so I said to the lawyer, Fanny Lafontaine, just that, Fanny, just that testimony. When you add the Truth and Reconciliation testimonies and that one, when I looked at the definition at the UN, they cover all of it, all of it. So we were crying, we were mad, and she said, let me think about it. And when we read the document and said, yes, the state is doing this wrong, it's a long way, it's a long approach, but the impact are in that definition. The approach or the way or the intention are in that definition. So of course, the country was shook. The reality of, no, it's not possible, we're a good country. Well, sometimes we seem to be doing great, but behind there's many people suffering. But because of their love, their strength, their capacity of resilience or standing and fighting for us, the next generation, and us for the generation that are there, or the grandchildren that are coming, that we have, it's the responsibility. So when we choose our parents, when I go back to that little beautiful story of many nations, because we're little stars in the sky, and we don't see the contract of life that colonization, racism, discrimination will be imposed on us. We don't decide in the morning and one day waking up, oh, I want to be a militant. It's imposed on us. Some of us will go through. Some of us will decide to end the life because it's too hard. Some of us will deny it. And some of us will cope with it, or all of that. So go back to that train. How resilient and powerful is my nation and the Naskapi nation, our neighbor. Amazing, we bought that train. There's no more segregation. We feed the people no matter where they come from. Even though we went to residential school, day school like I did, or no school, but the school of life, or full of PhD, whatever, we are so welcoming people, so beautiful and so powerful. By buying that train is a strong statement to say, you try to erase us, well, sorry, we're here, and we're here to stay. And with all that strength of those thousands of people, so many of them left the world, but many of them are still on Mother Earth. They're not giving up. They're still pushing the federal government, pushing, shaking with love or with conviction, any government across Canada, even our own Indigenous government, to remind that, okay, not because we did all those inquiry or commission, that reconciliation, it's something that we abide or embrace. It's something that was imposed on us. Remember what we said to you. We said, Quebec, Quebec, your first ancestor when they came here, we said, Quebec. Province of Quebec is using that word, in word that says you can get up from your boat. So we were welcoming people. We were warm. We were giving you our science. We were sharing you how to survive here in those cold places with lots of trees, lakes and rivers, animals, place that you have no clue and don't know how to survive those beautiful places. So we know how to live here for thousands of years. And today we will remind you with this reconciliation, we weren't mad when you come. We welcome you. But with the years that came after, we saw what you did to us. Yes, we got mad. And many of us are still mad. And it's okay. Some are forgiving, and that's okay also. It's part of our personal healing process. And that we need to respect that. Nobody is at the same level. But at the same time, with the strength of that generation still alive, the second generation, which is us, and the third generation, our children, by reminding all level of government to say, reconciliation, it's not natural for us, but that's the word we're using, then we need to put in your legislation, in your laws, in your parliament, in your government, in your culture, that responsibility that belongs to you, not only to us, but to all of us, making sure. So when I came at the Senate, one of the first thing I was involved, it's this bill C-29. It was to put in place a National Council for Reconciliation. One of the call for action of what the people share in their truth, and the commissioner for the TRC to say, one of the action that we need to see in Canada, it's to put in place a mechanism for accountability, a mechanism that will force every government to say, what did I do good this year? What did I did wrong this year? Or where am I slow this year? And why am I slow on that part? Or where am I denying? So I need an external body to watch me, to follow me, or to remind me that, hey, this is your part. The church has a responsibility, the religion and all of that, but also the state, the government, province and territories also. So this national council, it was a long process, and it did happen and pass in the parliament, the chamber, and our chamber also in the Senate. So we are putting in place the first ever national council on reconciliation that will oblige the federal government every year to table a report of what they're doing and where they're not pushing or doing enough. So can you imagine how the society can use that information, universities, allies or people, the court, because the court now is using the National Inquiry Report as a fact-finding or evidence. Many universities are offering courses on the MMIW and the TRC. So now by having those bodies in place or entity, and more independent it is, it's gonna force this government and next government to be accountable. And thanks to the TRC, because we use their call for action on the transparency and accountability to add one on the MMIW report. Because yes, inquiries is part of the legislation here in Canada. It's an obligation. There's inquiries every year under this legislation, but it doesn't oblige the government in power to say, I muzzled you for many years because you were doing the inquiry, so I was not able to respond because I was saying, let's see what the report will say. But now what we're hoping in each report inquiry, it's to have that obligation to report annually. You order us to do something, we did our homework, it was difficult, it was emotionally difficult. We reopened many wounds of our own people, our own wound, something that we tried to hide or to keep it closed. Now that you ordered that, what's next? So those moments are important, and everywhere we can have in this Mother Earth a place where a citizen, a human being, in private or openly can share their truth to the state, to the country, but with protection, with safe space to make sure that what I say won't be used on me, because my life could be threatened by the army, the police, or the government, or the military, or what's in place in my country. We need to have those safe space where I can say my truth and can be helpful for the generation now who is trying to live, but also for the next generation, but also the other country that are neighbor to you or a friend to you, or we are allied to you, to make sure that that jurisprudence can be used when we go at the UN or at La Haye or in Washington or other international body, that we can support each other. Yes, it's hard, but with the technology, we can be informed very quickly, very quickly. So every little step we do, we might not see the result in our living moment on Mother Earth, but it's important to do it because it's gonna be for my son or my granddaughter. It's gonna be for a person that I don't even know, but because we're not selfish and we do it when we're capable to do it without expecting right away result, because changing that is very hard. So it's something that we can have small win, big win, or wind that we won't see, but the next generation will do. So I wish you a good event, a good debate, good conversation, tears, laugh, hugs, or what you wish to do. But from here, you have an Innu sister with the colleagues on the other side of the door. My colleague from this small, beautiful office, that we send you love, we care, and we wish we were in the room with you.